The land stretched quiet under the breath of dawn, the prairie unfolding like an old quilt stitched by time and sorrow. Mist rose from the earth in pale ribbons, curling around blackened wood and bone-white ash. The house had long since given up its shape, collapsed into itself like a widow at a graveside. Smoke no longer whispered from its chimney. Nothing lived in the charred frame but memory. She stood just beyond what remained, shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, boots swallowed by morning frost. Her name was Mariah, though the wind had stopped calling it. Grief hung from her like a second skin, draped over her limbs, clinging to her spine. She held a child close to her chest, one arm curved like a crescent moon around his tiny body. His name was Jacob, 5 years old and freshly fatherless. 2 months earlier, the mine had swallowed her husband whole. The same mine that paid in dust and death, run by men who took more than they ever gave. There had been no ceremony, no grave, just a heap of rock and a name scratched into a crooked plank. The in-laws said it was God's will, said she was bad luck in a good man's life. They tolerated her grief as one might tolerate a winter illness, but when the weeks wore on and she hadn't left, hadn't remarried, hadn't become useful, they turned. It happened without shouting. That was the cruelty of it. Cold, clean, deliberate. One morning, the food was gone. The horse too. The only thing left was a half bucket of water by the stoop and a wool blanket folded too neatly, like an apology they never meant. Jacob had asked where his uncle had gone. She had said, somewhere colder than here. Then she wrapped the blanket around them both and walked into the pale open. The prairie had no use for mercy. It offered nothing unless you took it by knowing how. Mariah did not know how. She walked with purpose and no destination, feet blistered and raw by the second day. Jacob clung to her neck like a little bird, too tired to ask questions, too trusting to fear. She fed him scraps from her pocket, told him stories she didn't believe anymore, and whispered songs into his curls when he cried at night. Each hour became a quiet negotiation with the sky. One more mile, one more breath. She did not pray. Prayers had long since proved themselves traitors. She simply moved forward, as one does when there is nothing left behind worth turning toward. By the 4th day, her steps faltered. Her knees gave. She sank into the grass, the frost-kissed blades bending beneath her weight. The blanket had torn, its threads catching on thorns and bone. She curled her body around Jacob as if her spine could be a roof, her breath the warmth of a hearth. The boy stirred against her chest, but did not wake. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind. It spoke in a language older than grief, a hush passed down by wolves and rivers. She thought about her husband's hands, calloused and warm, about the sound of Jacob laughing in the summer, his curls bouncing as he chased fireflies. About nothing, about everything. Her lips moved, not in prayer, but in surrender. Then the wind shifted. She heard it, not with her ears, but through her bones. A presence. Steady. Unhurried. The kind of silence that follows a predator's step or a ghost's return. She opened her eyes. The sky had deepened into bruised lavender, stars winking into their places above the trees. And then he was there. He did not appear so much as emerge, as though the forest had exhaled him. Tall, wrapped in a buffalo hide, cloaked the color of old smoke, he stood barefoot in the frost like he belonged to it. His hair was long, black as wet bark, tied back with a leather cord. His face was carved in solemn lines, wind-chiseled and quiet. His eyes found her, slow and sure, like a man reading the edge of a storm. Mariah's fingers tightened around Jacob. She did not speak. Neither did he. He knelt beside them, movements slow and reverent, as if approaching a wounded doe. From beneath his cloak, he pulled a flat piece of dried meat and laid it gently beside her. Then a flask of water, its rim warmed by the heat of his body. He did not hand them to her. He offered them to the space between them, an offering to choice. She took the water first, pressing it to Jacob's lips before her own. The boy stirred, drank, sighed in his sleep. Only then did she raise her eyes again. The man's gaze remained steady, but not piercing. There was no demand in it, no hunger, just seeing. Mariah tried to form words, but her throat refused. Instead, she nodded, once barely. He responded not with speech, but with movement. He stood, stepped back, and turned toward the trees. Then paused. Waited. She looked down at Jacob, his tiny hand curled near his cheek like a question. She lifted him, slow and trembling, and followed the stranger into the woods. They walked through the deep hush of dusk, branches creaking like old bones. The man made no sound, but he knew the land like it was stitched into his soles. He led them to a cabin, hidden, stone-rooted, wrapped in ivy and thyme. Smoke drifted from its chimney in a lazy spiral, the scent of pine and something warm within. He opened the door and stepped aside. She entered. The warmth met her like an embrace she hadn't earned. Inside, a fire, a wool rug, shelves of herbs and jars, a small bed and a pile of pelts in the corner. Everything neat. Everything lived in. A cradle sat near the hearth, empty but not abandoned. He closed the door behind them and stoked the fire. Mariah laid Jacob down on the pelts, tucked what was left of the blanket around him, and sat beside him, legs folded beneath her. Her fingers trembled, but her spine did not. The man handed her a bowl of stew, roots and meat and something fragrant. Again, she fed Jacob first. Again, he watched silent. Only once the child had eaten and slept did she taste the food. Warmth bloomed across her tongue like a second sun. She did not cry. She had passed the place where tears lived. He sat across from her, back straight, hands resting on his knees. The firelight carved soft shadows across his cheeks. She did not ask his name. He did not offer it. But in that quiet place, among the cedar-scented air and flicker of flame, something passed between them. Not language, not promise, but the echo of shared survival. Outside, the wind curled around the cabin, softer now, as if the earth itself had exhaled. As if, somewhere beneath the layers of silence, it knew something had begun. Snow fell like sifted flour, gentle and unhurried, covering the world in a hush too deep for words. Morning light pooled soft across the cabin's windows, filtered through frost-laced glass like a secret kept from time. Inside, breath rose in silver curls above sleeping mouths. The fire in the hearth had died down to embers, but the warmth lingered, tucked into corners and woven through wool and wood. Mariah stirred first. Her body ached with the dull rhythm of survival, but not the same desperation as before. It was a quieter pain now, sore muscles, a bruised rib, the kind of ache that reminded her she was still alive. She blinked at the rafters, unfamiliar and dark against the dawn. For a heartbeat, she didn't know where she was. Then Jacob shifted beside her with a small sigh, his tiny hand brushing her arm, and memory returned like a tide. Smoke, frost, the man from the woods. She sat up slowly. The pelts beneath them were thick and soft, stitched with care and many seasons. Jacob lay curled like a pup, lips parted in sleep, cheeks pink with warmth. She brushed a hand over his curls and rose. The cabin was small, but carefully kept. A shelf ran along one wall, lined with dried herbs and bundles of sage, roots hanging from string. The hearth held a blackened kettle nestled over coals, the scent of broth and cedar mingling in the air. She moved like someone entering a chapel, cautious, reverent, unsure what could be touched. He was outside. Through the window she saw him, bare arms splitting wood with slow precision, each motion clean, controlled. His breath marked the cold like smoke from a pipe. He moved not like a man making firewood, but like someone tending something sacred. She watched him a moment, something in her chest tightening, then loosening again. When he returned, he brought the smell of snow and pine with him. He placed the split logs by the hearth without looking at her. Then, finally, he spoke. Eat. His voice was deep but quiet, like gravel softened by years of water. She nodded. Still unsure if she trusted her own voice, she ladled broth into a wooden bowl and sat beside Jacob, sipping slowly, letting warmth unfurl inside her. It wasn't seasoned like her mother's used to be, but it was real, honest. It tasted of roots and game and someone's care. He moved through the room, without rush or noise, gathering herbs, checking the latch on the door, tying back the hide that served as a curtain. She watched him not like a woman curious about a man, but like someone trying to learn a language spoken only through movement. He did not explain himself. He did not ask questions. And yet she did not feel unwelcome. Days passed in measured silence. Jacob grew stronger. His color returned. He laughed again, chasing his own shadow in the slivers of light that danced on the floor. The man carved him a small bird from wood, sleek and rounded, and left it on the fur blanket without a word. Jacob found it in the morning and carried it everywhere. Mariah tried to help. At first, he refused with a glance, not unkind but firm. But one morning, she rose before him and began sweeping the floor with the worn broom tucked behind the door. He didn't stop her. That evening, he gave her a basket of dried juniper and showed her how to tie it in bundles. Still, few words passed between them. She learned him in fragments. He rose with the sun, slept lightly, walked without sound. He had a scar running from collarbone to shoulder, like a crooked river. His hands were large but careful. His face unreadable, except when he watched Jacob. That gaze held something older than sorrow, softer than regret. She waited for him to ask, to wonder who she was, where she came from, why her eyes flinched at sudden noise. But he never did. His silence was not a wall, but a space. He made room, not demands. And in that room, she began to breathe again. One evening, as snow whispered against the windows, Jacob asleep on the floor with a wooden bird tucked beneath his chin, she found the courage to ask, "Why did you help us?" He did not look up from a feather he was shaping. "Because you were dying," he said simply. She nodded. It was the only answer she trusted. Later, she tried again. "What's your name?" This time he paused. Looked up. "Taenka." The syllables were heavy, drawn from deeper roots. "What does it mean?" "Bull elk," he answered, then resumed carving, as if that explained everything and nothing. She held the name in her mouth like a warm stone. "Mariah," she offered. He nodded once, as though he had known already. Time passed unmeasured. Snow deepened around the cabin. Outside, the world bristled with silence. Inside, a rhythm settled. Not comfort exactly, but something more honest. A truce with grief. Mariah learned the stove's temperament. How to listen for wind through the cracks. How to hang herbs, just so. She found her fingers returning to old knowledge, mending, stitching, weaving quiet usefulness into the corners of the home. She never asked how long they could stay. He never hinted they should leave. One afternoon, while Jacob napped and the stew simmered, she found herself beside Taenka at the fire. He handed her a piece of leather and a needle. "Teach me," she said. His eyes flicked to her hands, then back to the leather. He showed her the first stitch. They worked in silence. Eventually, she spoke. "You lost someone." He did not stop, but his shoulders shifted. "Yes." She waited. "Wife. Child. Long ago." Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from recognition. Grief called to grief. She reached for the needle again. "I'm sorry." He didn't respond, but his next stitch was slower, more careful. Later that night, Jacob woke, crying from a dream. Mariah rose to soothe him, but before she could cross the room, Taenka was there, kneeling beside him, humming low and strange, a tune without shape. Jacob calmed, drifted again. The man tucked the blanket tight and rose without looking back. Mariah watched from the doorway. She did not speak. She did not need to. When the snow melted and the first shy green returned to the world, Mariah stepped outside with bare feet. The cold was softer now. She closed her eyes and let the wind touch her face. It smelled of thaw and loam and something beginning. Inside, Taenka was teaching Jacob how to shape stone. The boy's laugh bubbled like spring water. Mariah watched through the open door. Her heart ached, but not in the way it used to. This ache was wide, like a riverbank. It held space. She stood at the edge of the woods and breathed in. Behind her, the cabin crackled with life. Ahead, the forest whispered of paths not yet taken. And somewhere in the quiet between them, she felt the truth settle in her bones. They were no longer simply surviving. They were staying. Spring unfolded like a whispered promise, tentative, unsure, then suddenly bold. Snow melted into the earth, feeding roots, that had slept all winter. Pale green shoots nudged their way through softened soil, and the river nearby began to sing again, louder with each passing day. The world was waking, and so was she. Mariah stood beneath a cottonwood tree, the hem of her skirt damp with morning dew. In her hands, a basket of nettles and wild onions gathered along the edge of the woods. Jacob chased sunlight through the trees, laughing as he dodged between trunks, his wooden bird tucked under one arm like a companion. He had grown, taller, surer, a little bolder. The fear in his eyes had faded, replaced with a curiosity that bloomed like dandelions in his smile. She watched him with quiet wonder. It amazed her how quickly children healed, how they could find joy again in the same world that had once broken them. From the corner of her eye, she caught a flicker of movement. Taenka, tending the garden bed near the cabin. He moved with that same careful grace, hands deep in the soil, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His silence had never felt empty. It was a silence that listened, that noticed. Over the last weeks, it had begun to feel less like a wall and more like a rhythm, something she could learn to breathe in. They had not spoken much about the past. Some wounds did not ask to be named. But in the hush between chores and the soft flicker of firelight, something had begun to grow between them, something unspoken, but alive. That afternoon, they worked side by side beneath the warm stretch of sun. He showed her how to plant wild sage, how to space the roots so they wouldn't crowd each other. She listened, her hands moving with his, her shadow overlapping his on the ground. Once, their fingers brushed in the soil. Both paused. Neither pulled away. Later, she boiled the onions, stirred them into the rabbit stew. He tasted it and nodded once. Approval, without embellishment. It meant more than praise ever had. One evening, she found him sitting by the river, sharpening a blade. She approached without sound, settled on a stone beside him. The water murmured past, swollen and restless. She didn't look at him as she spoke. I used to be afraid all the time. Even before the in-laws turned me out. Even when I was married, I carried fear like it was stitched into my skin. His hand stilled. He wasn't cruel, she added quickly. Just small. Always needing me to be smaller, quieter, easier. She plucked a blade of grass and twisted it between her fingers. Sometimes I wonder if that's why his family hated me so much. Because I didn't disappear after he died. Taenka said nothing. But his stillness was different now. Not passive. Listening. After a long silence, he spoke. My wife laughed like fire. Loud, bright, everywhere at once. She named our son after the wind, said it would carry him where she couldn't. Mariah turned to him, eyes wide. What happened? He glanced at the water. His voice was steady. They died the winter soldiers came. Fever took her. Then him. I buried them under the cottonwood before the snow thickened. After that, I stayed. Not to forget, just to remember differently. She reached across the space between them, touched his wrist lightly. You remember them in everything you do, she said. I see it. He didn't speak again, but his hand turned beneath hers, their palms brushing, callus against callus, warmth exchanged without need for words. That night, the air shifted. They didn't touch again. Not yet. But the quiet between them felt full now, like the hush before rain, or the pause at the top of a breath. Something was waiting. A few days later, the past came knocking. She was hanging herbs in the doorway when she saw him. Riding in from the edge of the trees, rifle slung across his back, face too familiar in its shape. One of the in-laws. The younger brother, Clayton. Same narrowed eyes, same cruel twist at the mouth. He dismounted without greeting. Jacob, playing by the cabin wall, froze. Mariah stepped between them without thought. Clayton grinned, though it didn't touch his eyes. Well, look who crawled out of the ash heap. Thought you were dead. She didn't answer. Her heart thudded, but her face held still. He looked past her toward the door. That your brat? He's got a claim, you know. Inheritance. My father didn't want to go into a squatter woman and some half-wild kid. Mariah stood taller. You abandoned us, she said. Left us to die. Clayton shrugged. We assumed you would. Figured it'd save us the trouble of lawyers. A shadow fell across the doorway. Taenka stepped out, wordless. His gaze locked with Clayton's, unreadable but heavy. Clayton laughed brittle. You got yourself a new man already? Guess grief don't stick too long out here. Mariah didn't flinch. But Jacob crept behind her, clutching her skirt. Taenka didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped closer, until the air between them tensed like a drawn bowstring. You will leave, he said. Clayton's smile faltered. Or what? Taenka didn't move. The land remembers. Something in his tone made even the trees seem to pause. Clayton shifted in his boots, muttered something about returning with papers, and climbed back on his horse. He didn't look back. When he was gone, Mariah exhaled shakily. He'll come again, she said. Taenka nodded. Let him. That night, Jacob clung to her. She rocked him gently, murmuring songs her mother used to sing. Taenka sat nearby, tending the fire. His presence felt like armor. After Jacob slept, Mariah turned to him. I'm not afraid anymore, she said quietly. He met her eyes. You shouldn't be. Outside, the wind shifted, smelling of rain and dust and something older. Inside, the fire crackled softly, and something long buried stirred to life. They sat together on the floor, side by side, the silence between them not empty, but waiting, an ember ready to catch. And far beyond the trees, thunder rolled like a promise yet to be kept. The earth held its breath. It was the kind of stillness that came before a storm, not loud, but deep. The hush that settled when the wind waited, and even birds tucked their wings in silence. Mariah felt it in her marrow as she stood in the cabin's doorway, a ladle stilled mid-stir in the soup pot, her eyes tracing the thin cloud of dust rising on the trail beyond the trees. They had come back. 3 riders this time. Not just Clayton, but his elder brother, Warren, and another man she didn't recognize. Broad-chested, badge glinting faintly at his hip. The smell of horses and arrogance reached her before their words did. Jacob was inside, painting with berry juice and a flat stone on bark. He didn't notice the threat yet. That was Mercy. She stepped out, apron still tied, hands at her sides. She didn't shake. She didn't speak first. Warren was the same as he ever was, smug and sun-creased, thick with the confidence of men who confuse bloodline for righteousness. Mariah, he said, voice dry and sharp. You've made yourself real comfortable. Mighty ungrateful, considering who you owe. She tilted her chin. I owe you nothing. Clayton chuckled, still smug. We're not here for talk. That boy belongs to our name, and our name's worth land. The third man stepped forward then, Deputy Holt, if she remembered right. His eyes flicked over the cabin, to the furs drying on the line, the gentle smoke curling from the chimney. Ma'am, he said, as if civility could make cruelty clean. We've received word your son may be in the care of an individual with no legal authority. We're here to reclaim the child for his rightful family. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Taenka stepped into view from the woods, bow slung across his back, a basket of roots in one hand. He walked without haste, but every line of his body hummed with restrained purpose, like a mountain that had decided to move. The horses shifted beneath the riders. He walked past Mariah, placed the basket at her feet, and turned to face them. There is no child to reclaim, he said, voice low but clear. Only a mother, only a boy. You abandoned both. Warren sneered. You're not the law out here. Taenka looked at him, long and still. No, I am the land, and it does not forget trespass. Clayton's hand hovered near his rifle. The deputy cleared his throat. Let's keep this civil. Mariah stepped forward then. Her heart was pounding, but her voice came calm, flat as hammered steel. Let me speak plain, since you came all this way. She took a slow breath, eyes locked on Warren. You left us to die. You stripped your brother's child of food, warmth, safety, and you did it like it was routine. You thought the world would finish the job for you. He's blood, Warren snapped. He's mine, she said, and her voice did not waver. And blood is nothing when the heart is empty. The wind shifted. A branch creaked. No one moved. Taenka's hand rested at his side. He was not armed, But he didn't need to be. The air around him did the work, a weight that reminded the world it stood on old bones. "Leave," he said. One word. Final. Warren shifted in the saddle. "We'll be back with writs. A judge. We'll take him legal, if not today." Mariah stepped forward again, and this time, her voice broke something open. "No, you won't." She reached into the folds of her apron, pulled out a folded slip of paper. She held it out. "This is a record of abandonment, filed by a circuit rider passing through last winter. Witnessed and signed. He sent it east. It's law now." Warren stared at the paper like it might bite him. "You think some drifter's letter means a thing?" She looked him dead in the eye. "It means Jacob is mine. Entirely. And it means if you set one foot past that tree line again, it's not just a man or a mother you answer to." Her voice lowered. "It's the land. And the land has already made its decision." Clayton cursed, turned his horse hard, rein snapping. Warren followed, spitting into the dirt as he rode. The deputy lingered, uncertain. His eyes flicked again to the boy's paintings drying on a string. He looked older in that moment. Smaller. He touched the brim of his hat to her. Then he, too, turned away. The dust of their passing rose and settled. Mariah exhaled, then folded the paper and tucked it away again. Her hands trembled after they stopped being useful. Taanka did not touch her. He did not speak. But he stepped beside her, and in that small act, she felt everything she needed. Inside, Jacob ran to her, wide-eyed, unsure. She knelt and pulled him close. "It's over," she whispered into his hair. "They won't take you. Ever." That night, the stars came out early. The fire in the hearth cracked gently, casting long shadows along the walls. Jacob slept beneath the quilt she had patched with her own hands, wooden bird still clutched in his fist. She sat by the fire, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, watching the flames dance like memory. Taanka sat across from her, the light painting his face in flickers. She studied him a long while before speaking. "I was always taught that love looked like safety, but I think that's only part of it. I think it's also seeing someone choose peace every day, even when they could fight, even when they carry grief." He met her gaze. "You do that," she said. He looked away for a moment. When he looked back, something in his eyes had settled, like a storm passing beyond the hills. "So do you," he said. She rose, crossed the space between them, and sat beside him. Their shoulders touched. She reached for his hand. This time he took it. No need for words. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, no longer warning, no longer wary. The fire burned low, steady. Beneath the floor, the earth did not sleep. It remembered every footstep, every promise. And above them, stars wheeled in the quiet sky, bearing witness not to a love born in ease, but in endurance, in becoming, in fire that had waited patiently beneath still earth.